Eleanor opened her eyes and was instantly shocked. She has no idea where she is. This is not her house or any house she knows. She only remembers blacking out in the club after feeling extremely sick. Something is very wrong here. She has no idea what had happened to her last night, but she knew one thing for sure. She had to get out of here. However, when trying to open the door, she realizes it's locked. She almost has a panic attack. Someone locked her inside this room, but she doesn't remember anything. She has to call someone. Eleanor sees her phone lying on the ground. She quickly grabs it. Then she realizes her phone is either broken or her battery is dead. She is starting to feel helpless. She can't believe such a fun night out ends in a total horror scenario. Eleanor then hears sounds from downstairs. She starts screaming. Maybe they can help. Then, she realizes the sounds are probably from the people who locked her in here in the first place. Then she looks outside and realizes she is being held in an apartment. With danger for her own life, she climbs outside of the window. She realized there was a fire escape on the side of the building. She has an extreme fear of heights, but the adrenaline in her body helps her through this. She jumped. She heard something crack. Did she break something? Due to her being full of adrenaline, Eleanor hardly felt anything. She wasn't worried about her leg being broken or not. She did make a lot of sounds when falling down. She hoped nobody heard it. At that moment, she started to feel dizzy as well. Eleanor now got paranoid. She thought she was being followed by somebody. She felt her leg bleeding, but she was determined not to get back to the apartment. She needed to shake whoever was following her. At that moment, she heard someone shouting. Eleanor felt like it was being directed at her. She fastened her pace to keep a safe distance from the individual. Eleanor had to get to a busy road. Maybe she could stop by a taxi to get her back home. She managed to hold a taxi, and the taxi driver was completely shocked. He asked Eleanor if she was all right. He wanted to drive her to the hospital, but Eleanor just wanted to get away. She saw that the person who was chasing her had run away. She asked the driver to get her to the police station. Without thinking about it, she stumbled inside. She shouted for help. At this point, her whole leg was covered in blood, and officers rushed to help her. Eleanor was calmed down and taken to a private room to clean herself. Two police officers who got to Eleanor first were shocked about how Eleanor looked. Eleanor had not looked in a mirror yet, but when she did, she was in shock herself. She looked like a complete mess, but she had to tell her story. Eventually, she told the story about her night out with her friends, about feeling dizzy and the blackout. Then Eleanor realizes something else. She was suddenly being searched. Eleanor felt like she was being treated as a criminal. What are they doing to her? She felt like she was not being seen as the victim anymore. The police finally got to her pocket and got something out of it. Eleanor realized something was in her pocket, and the police told her to take it out and hand it over. Eleanor searched her own pocket and took a note out. She wanted to read it, but at that moment, the note was taken out of her hand. The officers had a feeling Eleanor was hiding something. They took the note and started reading it. Then, all of a sudden, they walked away into an office. Eleanor started crying. She had absolutely no idea what all of this was. Then they returned. Eleanor demanded to know what was on the note, but the officers wouldn't let anything slip. They took this whole ordeal very seriously. The police captain walked into the room. He told the officers to arrest Eleanor. Eleanor was speechless. How could they treat her like this? She felt like the whole world was against her while she was escorted away. Eleanor was thrown into a holding cell. She was told that they needed to verify some things before they could proceed with her interrogation. She started to tell all she could remember. She gave them all the information about the club she went to. Eleanor told the police about the location she was being kept this morning, how she was locked into a room, and that she broke out using a chair. They thought she was crazy. They kept asking about the note. Eleanor had no idea how to react. Eleanor was being driven to the location where she was supposedly being held. Eleanor luckily remembered the exact way the taxi driver drove her this morning. Then they finally entered the street where she was picked up. Eleanor sighed with relief. Eleanor pointed to the building. The officers then realized there was actually something going on here. The police eventually got a search warrant. They decided to take no change. A whole squad was called to ram the door and arrest whoever was there. They still threatened Eleanor like she was some kind of criminal. But this would all soon change when they rammed the door. The moment they rammed open the door, they saw a young man climbing out of the window. The young man managed to escape via the same fire escape that Eleanor climbed down. Eleanor saw the young man. He looked familiar to her, but she did know for sure. The police chased the young man. The young man was very fast and even managed to get inside of a car. He ran like his life depended on it. He surely wasn't planning on getting caught anytime soon. But eventually, the police had finally caught up to the young man. He first asked Eleanor how she felt. He seemed relieved that she was fine. He told Eleanor that she was drugged and that it should have been fatal. She was lucky to be alive. It was an intense interrogation. They got his fingerprints and did a background check on him. They told him he was being charged for holding Eleanor against her will. He told them he wasn't keeping her locked in. It was for her own good. The background check came back clean, but with a name, David. David still refuses to talk about how he got Eleanor into the apartment in the first place. He did not want to incriminate himself even more than he already had. Then the officers pulled out the note that he had probably written. This was when the man turned pale. David was confronted with the note. This was all their evidence, but this seemed to trigger something in David. He couldn't contain himself anymore. He had the feeling that he probably had to come clean. David doubted himself, but eventually he broke down. David had the note in his hand. He knew this was it. He started shaking. The officers feared he could collapse at any moment due to the stress. Then he started explaining. David told the officers that he was called last night by some friends to come to a bar. He had nothing to do, so he decided to jump inside of his car and drive all the way to the bar. When he eventually got there, his friends wanted to go to the club in the next town. Here it was that he met Eleanor. He saw her in the club. He instantly saw that something was not right. He had a strange feeling when looking into her eyes. She was physically in the club, but she was totally not there mentally. This was when he did the unthinkable. David helped her to the bathroom, where she kept blacking out. Eleanor definitely was drugged, but not by him. He would never do that, he told the police. Eleanor was not in her right mind. David told the police that she had tried to attack him several times. They still did not believe his story. Why would he take this innocent girl all the way across the state? This was definitely not for her own protection. David continued his story. When she totally blacked out, he decided to go and look for her friends, but it looked like they had forgotten her. They were gone, as well as his own friends. He then decided to drag Eleanor to his car and drive her to his place. He locked the door because David thought he did this to protect her. He did not want to harm her or that she could harm herself. This is why he put a note inside of her pocket. But this note was very incriminating. He should have a good explanation. The note explained that Eleanor had a lot of drugs on her, and he took care of it. This is why they suspected Eleanor earlier. They thought she was a dealer. This did not seem to be the case. Eleanor explained that her friends had asked her to keep their stash safe. The officers now got the whole picture of what had happened. There still were some repercussions of the action of both Eleanor and David. David was eventually let go with a warning, because he just wanted to help her. Eleanor got a warning too. Eleanor and David still kept in contact after the incident. Eleanor vowed to never party again. David apologized. David and Eleanor eventually ended up as a couple. They felt a strong connection. Eleanor moved in with David in the apartment where she asked months ago.